am feeling really inspired. I had an opportunity to connect with beloved Pjae and Sheree and Jerry a few days ago, and we're so excited to bring this conversation into our affiliated New Thought Network, where we truly are uniting the New Thought movement with this cutting edge, very deliberate conversation. So I'd like to, first of all, introduce you to, and so we can get to know Sheree and Pjae a little more. I'm trusting that we're all good to go with mics. Everyone's muted, and we've got Pjae and Sheree live. Sheree is a fellow RVer. Michael and my husband and I live in an RV, and so does Sheree and her husband, Graham. And so we have that in common. And we've also served on the Anton Board of Directors together in 2019 and 2020. And so I really got to know Sheree, and many of us got to know Sheree as also our conference chair. And so it's really an honor to have you here today, co-leading this conversation. And we also have Reverend Pjae Stanley, and Pjae and I serve currently together on the board of directors here at the affiliated New Thought Network. And you might have seen her wonderful artistry if you visited our website, antn.org or newthought.org, either one of those. And Pjae is our team lead of our website team. And so it is my great honor and privilege to introduce you to my two friends, Pjae and Sheree. So thank you so much for being with us today. So I thought we'd get started. I'd love for you to share, each of you to share where you're living and how you're serving in your ministry. Where are you currently serving? So who would like to start us off?
I'm good. I could go if that's all right with you, Pjae.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. First, I just would love to say I'm so glad to see so many beautiful faces and new faces that I haven't seen, and also old friends. So it's lovely that you're here to have this conversation. And I also want to say that this is a sacred and safe space for us to do this work. You know, that there is no judgment, there's no blame, there's no shame, that we have an opportunity to look at our beliefs around race issues, as well as discerning whether we can create new beliefs about race issues. So that's our work to do as New Thought practitioners, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. So I am currently in Palm Springs, California, and I am virtually working as a transition minister with a small community in Richmond, California. And I was sharing with Allie and Jerry that I've been working with them for almost 6 months and I have not physically met anyone, you know, so it's been all virtual. And at first I thought, how much work could I possibly do or get to know? And it's amazing. This technology is amazing. You know, I've gotten to know them at a really deep level, and just grateful to be able to do this kind of work in this time virtually. So that's, I think, the short thing. I'm also a podcaster, I have to say that. And my podcast is Belief Busters. And the premise of that is giving adults permission to look at their belief systems, what they've been indoctrinated from childhood through school, through our society, and now saying, you're accountable for your consciousness, for all those thoughts and beliefs that you hold. You're accountable to know whether they are truth and resonate and align with oneness and with God. And so we have different topics and different things that we look at. And then, you know, really just be the practitioners, be the metaphysicians in creating these new, wonderful beliefs that allow us to thrive. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Sheree.
Thank you.
And Pjae.
Okay, so thank you again. Thank you so much, Allie and Jerry, for having us here today and to be talking about this subject. My name is Pjae Stanley, and I am the minister of Harmony Spiritual Center in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm a graduate of Emerson Institute and have been in New Thought since I think 1995 when I lived in California. And then my first minister was Reverend Marilyn Day Hall in El Cajon, California, and stepped in there and realized I was home and have been there, just in this ministry, doing this work because it's just so powerful for me having, and I think like many people who've been searching, this is just such a great, um, I'm home. I'm home. And I think that other people that, tribal members, as I call them, who don't even know that we're out here, that we're here doing this. I didn't know. That's part of my ministry. The reason why I bring that up is I had a retreat this weekend, or yeah, this, couple, 2 Saturdays ago. And the facilitator asked me what was my vision, why was I a minister, and I just thought, oh, wow, I haven't actually talked with my board about that. It's really kind of crazy to be a part of this and never have explained it. But my whole ministry is about being a lighthouse. It's about shining the light and being here for those who need us right now, who are looking for us right now. And I think that that's part of why I'm excited about Anton, because that seems to be Anton's ministry, is not only uniting the New Thought movement, but also being here, making sure that we're going to be here in the long run, in the long term, for people years to come who are looking and searching and wanting to be around like minds. So that's me in a nutshell. That's who I am. That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
again,
you.
welcome the two of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So our topic for today is identifying and healing racism. And this is a very timely discussion. It's a very sensitive discussion. We have all experienced, if we've been online or watching television, or maybe in our communities, we've experienced a lot of chaos, a lot of pain and suffering, and there's been many deaths and violence, and we've over the last I'll just use this COVID time. Over the last year, we've really been immersed in seeing how our country is divided and how alive racism and prejudice is. And so I don't feel that I'm an authority, but I'm the leader of the speaker series. So I'm wanting to help co-facilitate a deeper conversation. And Anton as a whole wants to continue a deeper conversation so that we can be that lighthouse, be there in the New Thought communities for a place to come to find some answers, to find support, and to find a new vision for a better world that our hearts know is possible. So we've discussed what this conversation might be, and we went round. It could go off in 100 million different ways, and so we're going to keep it organic. We're going to let it grow as it wants to. And I invite each of you to step into your vulnerable hearts here, to really listen with new ears, so that you can hear something new. And be vulnerable, please. Be vulnerable if Pjae or Sheree ask questions. I really encourage you to step up and answer. This isn't a place of judgment. This is a place of growth. This is a place of finding out what our beliefs are. And so I'm going to ask Sheree to start us off, because she is the belief buster. And I know she's got some ideas of what she's interested in bringing to the forum.
Sure. Thank you, Allie. I think for me, the baseline is that if we are raised in Western culture, excuse me while I shoot my husband for wrinkling papers. Boo.
RV living.
All right, he's still alive. Okay. Um, so for me, it's having this clear understanding that if we are raised and educated in the Western culture, that we have biases. We can't be living, let's say, here in the United States and not have biases against race. We're conditioned to have that. So I kind of want to make that a clear foundation because it's so uncomfortable for us to really go and say, yes, I do have biases, you know? So I want you to really be open to this understanding that through the media, through schooling, through our society, through our neighborhoods, through our friends, through our work colleagues, we are conditioned to see a difference between someone who is of color and someone who is not. We've also been conditioned that if you are of color, there's something not as worthwhile as someone who is white American. That's just part of our cultural DNA. And now some of you may be thinking, no, that's not true. But if you turn on the news or any reports, you will see a difference in the way that the biases are portrayed. So I think I just want to have that as our base so that you're not coming up from, well, I don't have that. You know, I just want us to be clear that that's part of our indoctrination in our society. And so we know this. And now what is ours to do with that? Do we continue to hide and say, no, I don't have any biases, that never happened, my family was wonderful, I'm sure your family was wonderful? Or do we say, my family's wonderful, and this is what I learned about the differences in race? So it's just about having that willingness to have the conversation and then go, okay, so now what?
Right.
DJ, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I thank you, Sheree. You set that up very beautifully. And so, yeah, I just want to say that it's, as we're sitting here talking, and as Sheree's talking, and all of you are here, my heart's pounding because it's a difficult subject. It's a difficult subject to step into, to talk about, to admit, to own, on both sides. And so, or all sides, not both sides. There's only two sides. On all sides, it's just difficult to talk about it, to admit. And as a Black woman in America, the racial divide is not just about you know it's about how we step into a room and how we're seen just because of the color of our skin, but also and how we're seen in our own groups, outside of our groups. It's just everywhere, and it's prevalent, and it's prevalent around the world. I know we're talking about trying to contain this subject to make it something that's useful for us now. And when we talked about it before, we talked about when Jerry and Allie and Sheree and myself got together, we said, well, we want to talk about the micro level and not the macro, not go out so far. What's ours to do? Which Sheree said right there. What is ours to do? And so I just kind of want to think about, when I step into a room, when anyone of color steps into a room, what's on your mind? What what fears do you have, or concerns do you have, or, what's automatic for you? And just start to think about, releasing some of these automatic things and saying, well, and even asking yourself, what's on my mind when that happens, because it's there. It just is. And so I just want to say that I understand it's there's a lot of emotion around it. And I think as intelligent people, who you guys showed up at this table, so if you stepped into this arena to be a part of this conversation, we just want to honor you and say thank you for being here, that we understand how difficult this conversation can be, and we appreciate you being here to be involved in
Thank
the
you. Thank you, Pjae. Thank you, Sheree. So I'd like to invite everyone to, if you do have any thoughts or questions that come up for you whilst one of us is speaking, you're invited and encouraged to write something in the chat. If you would also like to answer Pjae and Sheree's questions here, does anyone is anything coming up for anyone, or a comment in general as we start this conversation, as you're listening to these beloved friends of mine talk about, Sheree's talking about the beliefs, our indoctrination, what we learned as youngsters from our families, from our schools and workplaces. And Pjae's asking the very brave question of, what do you think when I show up in a room, or someone with my skin color shows up in the room? And I'm feeling immediately like shocked to hear that question, a little nervous to answer, to be the first one to maybe answer that question. And so I'm imagining that we're similar in that way, but I don't want to project that or assume that. For me, I grew up in a family of athletes. My family, my mother and father and stepfather were all Olympic level athletes. And so from a very young age, I was surrounded with a lot of gorgeous, muscular Black bodies. And so in my world, I saw great beauty and strength and power. And there were athletes of every race, not every race, but many. And so I wasn't raised to see other. So that was my first experience with that I can remember. So would anyone else like to jump in just to break the ice, to bring your voice to the conversation, because it's really needed and wanted as we venture out to be brave to even have a conversation about racism.
I know Linda was raising her hand there.
Thank
Please.
you, honey. Yeah, so a couple things. I want to applaud Sheree for her opening remarks because I concur really, really strongly that the first thing we need to do is own it. I recently had the opportunity to participate in a large book study online experience, and the book that we studied was Waking Up White. And so if any of you need to have a better understanding of how racism is almost in our DNA, almost, then I encourage you to take a look at that book, because the author does a brilliant job of bringing home the idea that that first we need to own it, and I'm doing that. I spent many years during my 20s as a professional paid organizer around civil rights, and I learned a lot, and I honestly believed that I was over it, pretty much. Not 100% sure, but I was thinking it was everybody else's problem and not mine. Until about a year ago, when I decided to sell all of my possessions and downsize and start over again. And so I put my things on Facebook Marketplace, and people came out of the woodwork to buy the things I had for sale, because I made them very affordable and they really were lovely things. And so I live alone, and I live in a high rise, and I'm up on the top floor. And so inviting people to come into your home to look at your stuff, I didn't have a lot of fear around it, but my kids did, and everybody was warning me that it wasn't safe and blah, blah, blah. So there was that. Anyway, I'm going merrily along and everything's lovely until one young man looked me up on Facebook. And when I looked at him and I saw the very dark skin and the long dreadlocks and the clothing that was, I don't know, suggested something that I couldn't relate to, and he was wanting to know when he could come, I felt my body clench up inside. And I said, oh shit, there it is. There it is. So I share that with you because, and it takes a great deal of courage for me to admit that, but I think it's important because I think that's a place where we can all start. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Angie.
She has something.
Yes, I just a comment here. I believe it goes very, very deep in our DNA of the United States DNA. I remember when we were young, I was a first generation Italian, and the Italians in our particular area had to live in a particular area. I'll just tell you what the nickname was, Dogtown. But anyway, my dad, being a World War I vet, and that's how I became a citizen of the United States during the First World War. He was a disabled vet, but we purchased a place in a different area, and we were surrounded by a group of folks who wanted to burn us out. Anyway, we survived. But anyway, it goes very deep. And even to this day, after all those years, it affects me.
Thank you, Angie.
So much for sharing that. It's really painful and powerful. Yeah, Michael.
I'd like to share.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. My first recall, I was talking to God when I was 2 and 3 years old, and I had I think I had an inherent love for all people, regardless. But having said that, my first memories were with my father and my grandfather, Racine, Wisconsin, and I was born in 1971, and they were outspokenly prejudiced. And my grandfather was very much, and so I just remember him yelling at the Black woman pushing the children down the street to get out of their neighborhood. And I remember my heart sinking and having this overwhelming awareness that was not right. And it brings tears to my eyes, because I know, in some way my grandfather was a good man, but not in that way. And, he was a product, as Angie said, not to defend him, but I think that it's very, very close, that it's fair to say that it was in his DNA. And that part of the country and that time, there, he wasn't alone. And that wasn't a one-off event. But I knew within me very loud, very clear, that was not right.
Thank you, Michael. There was a question from Mary Beth about would like to discuss the concept of racist. I know that most every white person I know immediately says they are not racist. And this comes from a book that I hope that we'll be able to study in the next couple of months called White Fragility. Jerry and I have said yes to co-hosting it. Thank you. And here she says, I could see the power of the belief that only bad people were racist, as well as how individualism allowed white people to exempt themselves from the forces of socialization. I could see how we are taught to think about racism only as discrete acts committed by individual people rather than as a complex, interconnected system. And in light of so many white expressions of resentment toward people of color, I realize that we see ourselves as entitled to and deserving of more than people of color deserve. I saw our investment in a system that serves us. I also saw how hard we worked to deny all this and how defensive we became when these dynamics were named. So what we're talking about is this ingrained in our society that there is privilege if you are white. There is a certain level of those rules don't apply to me. And even in our society, we can look around recently with just the different protests. So you have the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That's nonviolent for the most part, protesting, that are faced with troops and, the militia and whatever else. And then you see violent riots, that are white, that are armed, and it's a completely different response. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about this level of ingrained systemic racism where there are two sets of rules. One if you're white, another if you're a person of color. That needs to change.
I do want to add, I'm sorry, I want to add something to what you just said, because that brings up an issue or a conversation that's been floating around in my circle, and certainly I'm sure probably in yours as well, Sheree, is that response to the storming of the White House. When a Black person, shows up with a telephone in their hand, in the wrong neighborhood, they get shot and killed. But when, white people storm the White House, not a shot is fired at them. So you just, that's a big picture, but that's a big thing to talk about. But that's to show you the difference between how when Black people show up to just peacefully say something that, or just to be walking around in our neighborhoods with a phone in our hand, we have to be anxious about that. We have to be anxious about where we drive and making sure where our hands are. We have to be vigilant, hyper vigilant, and even more so for a Black male than a Black woman. So it is absolutely different sets of rules for the two different groups. Just that is real for us, and that's how we have to live. So
may I add to that really quickly?
Please.
This just in the last little while, this really kind of hit me in the side of the head, the joys and wonders of denial. And if it doesn't affect me personally, then I don't have to see it, and it doesn't really exist. And if it's not been my experience, then it doesn't exist. My grandfather, my grandparents on my father's side lived in the Amish community outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And my father, since probably about 1915, no, probably since about 1900. And my father was born in this little town outside of Tulsa in 1929. Terrible, terrible things happened in Tulsa in the Black community in 1921, I think. I had no idea. We as a family never talked about it. I was mortified when I found out that happened. And of course my family was there, but being in your own little white world, they just didn't talk about it. I was amazed. And so how often is that our experience? If it's not been our personal experience, then it doesn't exist. So I'm so thrilled that we're having this conversation today.
I think, Michelle, you had your hand up a while back. So I just wanted to address the fact that you had something you wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, just talking about the systemic, issue of, so two things. One is I am painfully aware that I don't know what I don't know. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because yes, I grew up with white privilege, and yet I want to know more. What does that mean? And I love, Pjae, what you just, I don't love it, but I love that you brought to the awareness of, as a Black person, I need to watch where my hands are. As a white person, I don't. Okay, that's white privilege. I don't have to pay attention to where my hands are in my car. So thank you for making that so concrete. I appreciate concrete. The other thing I was just being reminded of, I hadn't thought about this in decades, but when I was in junior college, I met a Black man, and I really liked him, and he liked me. And when my father found out, and this goes to the kind of the systemic thing, his words were, now, I'm not prejudiced, Michelle, but you can't date a Black man because what will people say? And oh my God, if you fell in love and got married and had children, your children would be in for, being mixed race. That would be awful. But we're not prejudiced, right? So there was this, it just makes my skin crawl thinking about it now. But I listened to him, and I quit dating that man. So that memory just pulled up for me just now, and I wanted to share that. Thank you, Pjae, for noticing I had my hand up.
Thank you for sharing.
Michelle, thank you so much. What that brought to mind for me was Graham's father had that conversation with him when we started dating. So it's it's everywhere. Mary Beth, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was going to, Linda, the book you are reading is a book that a few of us on the call are actually reading out loud on Zoom every week. The book is called Waking Up White, and it's written by a woman named Debbie Irving. And her husband describes her as it couldn't have happened to a whiter person. But she has this wake up because she went to a class. She actually took a college class on understanding systemic racism. And you know, what you were saying, Michelle, is so right on. It's like, we don't know what we don't know. And it's just stunning. We're seeing a lot of it though. And I don't know if it's just because it's really the scab is off. One of the things that I've quoted a lot is a quote by Dr. Jim Lockard, who said that Trump was the pus, but he wasn't the abscess, and we all have work to do. And
I'm sorry, repeat that. I repeat that.
He said Trump is the pus. He is not the abscess. We have work to do. And, you know, the work that I'm seeing, like just yesterday night, you know, there's one of the congresswomen who's brand new in Congress and is blatantly what do you call it? A conspiracy theorist embracer. And one of the statements she made on the news last night was Black people and Mexicans, their problem is gangs. It's not white people, it's gangs. And things like that. You just hear things like that now and they just hit my ears like, oh my God. And the other thing I was going to mention, if we have not seen anything as blatant as after the insurrection, how the people who did it were treated in the aftermath. You know, women being helped down the stairs in the Capitol so they don't fall down, and people invited and being taken. Aftermath of watching people being arrested and then released on bail to their parents and things like, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, you know, we do have a lot of waking up to do, but I think it's really starting to happen. It's almost like the Berlin Wall. You know, once there's a chink, there's a whole lot of wall falling down here. But I'm really grateful that we're all having the conversation. And Sheree and Jerry, I'm so glad you're going to do that book. I just bought it.
Anyone else raising their hand? Thank you, Mary Beth.
Dr. Geddes and then Bill.
Okay, Charles?
Understanding that the reality of the word white only developed in the Americas, that it was not something that existed before, and that it was about a systematic disenfranchisement of Black America. It was an intent to divide the country from the beginning, to have white be the supreme entitled race. And actually, so far as I'm concerned, I don't want to define myself as white because that's not, I'm mixed all over the place. But the bottom line is that that term has been carried for generations and generations as one of privilege and rights that others did not have from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And the whole journey right now is that we're in the opportunity to get educated and to open to see things in a new way, in a new light. And, you know, the laser quick, my whole new call and journey called Mind Your Own Becoming is the journey of personal and collective evolution that we are now responsible for in a greater term and way than we've ever been before, because it is up to us. Not just the inner soul work that makes us feel good, but it's out of that, what's mine to serve and do and rise to do exactly what you're doing here. And, you know, this journey for me has taken me to a new home base in Montana,
But the reality is that I want to zoom all over the place in regards to educating and enlightening and having uncomfortable conversations that enable us to finally realize, oh my God, I never really understood that. And that we can change the history of this country by awakening together. And so I'm so thrilled that you're doing what you are. And I want to connect with you later and talk about you being a part of what I'm doing. I love you. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. And
I
Bill,
do want to let me just add something to what you said, Dr.
yes.
Geddes. And it's because I'm just reading the book Cast, and the whole idea of race, of assigning race, was specifically designed so that Blacks would be less. So there was no need to, there was never a need to assign race, unless you want to split it out and make one group superior and one group inferior. And that was created for that very specific reason.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly correct. Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for letting me jump in there.
It's your show. Thank you. And I'm really glad to be able to take part in this conversation. So when all of the racial trouble started boiling over in the summertime, our group got together, and because we wanted to do something about it and bring something different on. And in schooling myself, discovered the difference between somebody being racist and somebody living in a racist system. And when we step back and look at it from, you don't even have to step back very far to see how racist our entire society is. Some of it's by laws, most of it's by laws. Other parts of it are by practice. And then there's the stories that we tell. In 1619, when the first Blacks were bought by whites, it was not the first time that racism existed in this country. We stole the land from the indigenous peoples. So, and I say we because I'm a middle-aged white man, you know, if there's any privilege, I got it. And so Mary Beth had put in the chat the question about, you know, people identifying themselves as a racist. And nobody will, or very few people will. But if the question is, do you live in a racist society? Are you part of a racist system? The answer has to be yes, because we can look at that objectively. And it's hard to be defensive about that. So what we focused on is white supremacy, and the system is white supremacy. And then, you know, the folks who were storming the Capitol were white supremacists, you know, the ones that are proudly owning that. You know, and I don't have any answers, but that's why I'm, you know, glad to be continuing the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. So, Sheree, we talked about the importance of identifying our beliefs, because many of us, I heard several of us say, well, I hadn't thought of this until now. That, you know, as we enter into the conversation, things start to bubble up in our memory, things start to bubble up. And so we've heard from one another, and I'm sure there's more. I'm sure each of us are sitting in our homes thinking about our own experience and what we believe about ourselves, and whether we're prejudiced or racist or feel like we have privilege. And Sheree, with your focus being on beliefs, and now that we've heard some of the beliefs, and in New Thought, we're always thinking we need to have a new thought. So what do we do with these beliefs? Can we create new thoughts, and will that even help? And I also know we've talked about the importance of not just coming here today and listening. The objective wasn't to put on a show, to put on a broadcast where we deliver some information and then it's just in the library on our website as a video to watch. But we actually start to identify what we can do moving forward now that we've identified our thoughts and feelings about white privilege or prejudice. So what do we do now?
Well, I think that's where the healing starts, right? And the healing is really being open to seeing the totality of who we are. You know, we say often that um, there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and it's God, the good, omnipotent. And then, you know, we come and incarnate on the planet. And when do you remember when you were like just learning how to move your limbs and walking, and just everything was brand new? You loved everything, everything and everyone, inanimate objects, animals, trees, people, right? It was just this love fest of who you are because you just came from the ethers, right? From that connection to God. And then we get into our family systems and our families with their best intentions. So hear that. Our families with their best intentions, wanting us to thrive in this society. That's their goal, right? When you're a baby and you come in, they want you to thrive. And so they teach you what they have learned to thrive. And as a child, your very survival is based on pleasing those people that are taking care of you. So you will do what you are taught to please them, to be seen as successful, to be loved, to be taken care of. So that's the framework. And now, as enlightened beings, ours is to make peace with that. So here comes the healing. To make peace with that is part of our society and how we train our children, how we help them to discern. Don't go there, that's danger, danger. You know, go here, it's okay, you're going to survive this way. So I think for us, it's loving them for the best that they could do, you know. And I remember my therapist a long time ago saying, you know, they did the best they could. And at the time I was so angry. I was like, not acceptable. But where I am now is really getting that, you know, they are human beings making mistakes, having thoughts, doing what they were told and taught to do. And so what that allows us now to do is not be in the blame and shame of it. It now allows us to do some healing and integration work. It allows us to say, if I am of God, then all of me is of God, right? So my biases are of God. My dislike is of God. My crankiness is of God. You know, all of that is of God. So now I'm in a state of love and acceptance. Now I can do the work. Do you hear that? Now I can do the work because I'm not coming from a place of I've got to excise something. I've got to get rid of something. I don't have to label it as I'm bad or this is bad and I need to suppress it or not look at it. No. Now you're in a place of saying, this is all holy. This is all holy. And now if it's all holy, I get, as this awakened being, to make the decision what's in alignment with oneness. What's in alignment with oneness? And each of these beliefs I get to look at. So if I see someone who is different from me and I get that visceral feeling, Linda, do you mind if I pick on your example that you gave? Okay, thank you. So in Linda's case, you know, there's this visceral like, this is somebody who my belief says or my upbringing says, danger, 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 right? So there's that emotion. Now, as self-aware adults, we can unpack that feeling. Here's the feeling. What's the thought? Because you know if we're having a feeling, right? We've got a thought that supports that feeling. So now we get to do that work of, okay, so what is the thought that is creating this emotion? And now with that thought, we get to now trace back to whose thought and belief is that? Who's that? Whose is that? Who told me that? How did I learn that? And then I get to look at that and go, wow, that belief came from my mom, my dad, my great-grandfather, whomever. And I get to say, thank you to that belief. I get to say, thank you, I love you to that belief, because that was the belief that I had at that time that served me. And now I can make peace with that and say, but I no longer need you. I no longer need that belief. I'm in a different place. And we choose to release that belief and then create a new one. What's that new belief that we can create from oneness, from allness, from God? And then step into that power. Step into creating that thriving life. So I think that's the overarching process that I use with my clients when we're talking about beliefs and breaking down each one, because we have so many beliefs, and so we get the opportunity to do this in a place of love. And then from there, once we do our own work, now we're able to really be teachers and leaders as we go forward. That's why we do the work. Like Dr. Charles was saying, it's not about the feeling good, where we get stuck in new thought. We get stuck as a group overall in new thought about this feeling good that we do this work. But it's not just for that. It's so that we can go out and change the world. All right, I know I got preachy, so that's it for me.
Thank you, Sheree. Pjae, before we take a few questions, do you have any thoughts that are coming up for you as you listen to our participants here and to Reverend Sheree?
I do, and I love the fact that you started, Sheree, with the act of forgiveness. I just don't think anything can move forward without forgiveness. And as I'm doing some work myself in the transformational power of love, the whole idea is to be in this state of pre-forgiveness, which means that everyone that you are affiliated with, associated with, that's in your circle, that's not in your circle, just everyone is already forgiven for whatever atrocity or whatever pain or heartache or whatever you feel has happened, because we've all been hurt. We all have these little nicks that we grow up with, and they just turn into this armor that we have around ourselves. And so the work for me to begin with is always about pre-forgiveness. So I can step into whatever it is, whoever it is I'm speaking with, and forgive them, whatever they're doing, and then go into what we're doing together right then and there. And so it starts with pre-forgiveness. But the other thing that she talked about, and that I believe we're about in New Thought, is taking ownership and responsibility for where we are now. Yes, our parents did the best they could, and I think all of us have had to come to that realization. And I think my kids, of course, are going to have spend some time on the couch from all the things I've done to them. They're blaming me for, and I get that. That's our role as parents. Our kids are going to do that. But after that part, there is the responsibility to say, okay, yeah, that's it. Now, who do I want to be? So when I step into something, a racist situation, there's pre-forgiveness first, because I'm thinking, okay, well, that's your thought. That's how it is. That's, whatever the reason is, I'm not angry with you. It is what it is. But the second thing that happens for me is I have to ask myself, why is whatever I'm feeling, why is it true? Because that's all I can do. I can't do anything about what you're thinking or perceiving. I can do what I'm thinking or perceiving. So my point is this, and that every situation that we're in, it's about stepping in with pre-forgiveness. It's about acknowledging what your role is in it, because it's a two-way street. How am I receiving what it is you're doing? What can I come back to you with in love? Because I don't think that coming back with hatred or anger changes anything. I think it comes back. If I come back with why is that true for you? Or what makes you say that? Or what makes you think that? And give them some other alternative. Because I, obviously been in a lot of situations, enough situations in my life where something that could be very angering and hurtful was there. And I didn't want to allow it. I just wanted to go above that, beyond that. And how do you get beyond that? And for me, those are the things. Just working on pre-forgiveness every single day, every morning in my morning ritual with prayer and meditation. It's about forgiving myself, forgiving everything and everyone else, so I can go out into the world with this whole feeling of pre-forgiveness, so I'm ready to do the work. And so I think that that's a place where we can all begin to start individually, because back again, it's the micro. What's yours to do? What will you do in every situation? How will you look at whatever is coming up for you? If you're part of the person that's bringing out that racist or biased view, to ask yourself, why is that true? Is it true? Why do I think it's true? What else could be true here? What else could be true here? So that's just what I wanted to bring to that part. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have time for a couple of questions. We're almost at the top of the hour, and we are going further. We are going to continue this conversation. For now, we're talking about this from a very personal level. So does anyone have a thought or a question they'd like to bring up before we turn it over to Jerry, who's going to share some information with us?
Hi, Allie. It's Trish. I have a comment.
Yes.
First of all, so much gratitude for this session, Pjae and Sheree. And Sheree, and when you were speaking, what crystallized for me is, because I'm white privilege and one of those people who thinks she's not a racist. Okay, and what you were talking about, I realized that there's this layer of shame that I would have if I had to admit it. And so I don't want to admit it because I would be ashamed. But the way you wrapped it in the oneness of spirit, and that contains everything, even what I might consider my racism and all of that, and my unawareness of my white privilege. And thank you. I feel like that just cracked it open for me, that I will now, hopefully, prayerfully going forward, be able to look at it, because I don't think I've ever been willing to look at it, because it felt shameful.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you so much.
That's powerful, Trish. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I'm on my phone, so I'm scrolling through each screen. I'd love it if, Jerry, if you would like to share a little bit about the two topics that you have for us.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Ali, and Reverend Pjae and Sheree, thank you so much. And everyone, again, thank you so much for being with us today. Obviously, the conversation doesn't end. Obviously, gee, we talked about it for an hour, now we can move forward with our lives. There's way more to it than that. So I'd like to share a couple of resources, one of those being the book study that we kind of intimated about. Reverend Sheree and I will be leading a book study on this book, White Fragility, starting Wednesday nights, starting Wednesday, February 10th from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. It will go for 8 weeks, and you'll be hearing much more about that and the links to the Zoom call and all of that. So stay tuned for that. But if this is of interest to you, mark your calendar. Again, start at Wednesday nights, starting February 10th from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then the other thing, as you may know, Anton is a tithing organization, and for the last 2 quarters of 2020, we've tithed to the Unity Center for their Anti-Racism Institute. And I'd like to share my screen and show you very quickly what they're doing. This is a large Unity church in the San Diego area. Reverend Dr. Wendy Craig Purcell is their senior minister. This is their homepage. If you go to theunitycenter.net and then click on outreach and racial equality work, and I'll put this in an email as well so that y'all will have this information, outreach racial equality work, and they've created this dismantling racism curriculum, free to everyone, and there is a link on their webpage. But as you see there are lesson plans, guides, and other resources for beginning this, they call it a braver conversation. They created their Braver Conversations team in 2017 about, as we're talking about today, identifying and dismantling racism. And so these resources are available to you and your congregation, to everyone. And so I invite you to take advantage of that if you would like. And feel free to reach out to me for more information if you'd like.
Beautiful.
And Dr. Martha has posted the link on that. Thank you for that. Yes.
Beautiful. So I'd like to close with a short prayer, a closing prayer, and a great, giant, big thank you to all of you that have been here today, those of you that are listening to the replay, and especially to our beloved friends, Pjae and Sheree. Thank you so much for bringing this conversation, this bigger conversation to us at Anton. Thank you. So let us together turn within and go to the one place, the one power, the one presence that we find ourselves in everywhere, all the time, all at once, in the here and now. And as we connect heart to heart, soul to soul, I trust and know as we move forward from this deeper conversation that we do so with gentleness and compassion, knowing that each of us are here to do our own work, to clear out, to identify and clear out anything that is hindering us from embodying our full magnificence. I speak a blessing on each and every person that is here listening. I speak a blessing on us, humanity, evolving and moving forward as one, equal, loving, harmonious, kind, and peaceful. I give great thanks and offer this prayer with love, and so it is.